Aqueduct, race 8 on November the 19th, Friday. And so I started looking at this. I pulled it up, and some immediate things just jump out at me. And the first is the number 9 horse here. Papa Smooth's got a huge pace advantage over the rest of the field. Looks to be the speed of the speed. The speed rating in this race is relatively light. I would say a little bit below average at 19. Look at the header. The contention is a sun. Yeah, here's a plot fit that's a red, but we're still considering this race because, uh, again, does that say you can't use this when it's red? But we just think that the nine's edge here just kind of stands out visually, and that's what we're looking for. So what do I look for when I look at these types of horses when I see them on the plot? Well, I go to their run lines, and what I want to make sure is that the horse doesn't have some limitations where he's kind of not finishing and so forth, which could be related to bleeding and respiratory. Sometimes uh, some of these horses look good on the plot. They can establish a lead, but they just collapse anyway. So, but this horse doesn't seem to be the case. Papa Smooth has no red on his run lines except for a C he ran in his second race, and that was because of trouble at the start. He had trouble. He wasn't pushed. So we can excuse that. But look at these other races. When I look at his debut, he was slow out of the gate, rushed hard, lead presser, dueled. And you can see the extended comment says gritty debut. Only concern race takes something out of him, which probably did in the second race. Then they put him on turf. We thought that'd be a good thing. He did improve, obviously from the poor race, but he just kind of looked intimidated in that race. They switched him, back to dirt, and he dueled, but he faded a little bit and finished fifth. And then they moved him up, and it was in the slop, and they moved him up to maiden 40, and he wins, and he runs a really good 85 Optics Fig. Then first time versus winners at this level, it couldn't keep up. That was a Saratoga race, so it looked like a pretty decent race. And then he comes back in this Belmont race after a 92-day layoff, and he was in a duel, and he was against the flow. So this horse looks like he's got some chops, relatively speaking, for non-2 level. So we'll say that that pace advantage looks good, and this horse looks like a very strong and viable contender, especially at 9-2. Um, the thing is, with these races, you question a lot of these horses. They don't have a tendency to win. But what we like about this horse, he's lightly raced, still a 3-year-old. Looks like there's upside. This horse looks pretty solid, I thought. A couple other interesting horses. The other thing that kind of stood out when I was looking through this quickly, it was like Eucharist here, right? He got the old kickback, and we saw how effective kickback could be, right? Because horses do not run their optimal race when they get kickback. So this one's a little bit more. You have to kind of dig, but it's a big price horse and could be a horse that you can kind of factor into your exotics or maybe back up on your multi-race tickets. And again, there's another horse that won right out of the gate at Keeneland on a maiden special weight. Oops. And then after that, this horse ran. They moved them winners and they stretched them out 2 turns. And you can see our optics note said that doesn't seem to suit him. So let's get him shorter. They did the next time. Just might have been pitched a little bit over his head. It was a very strong race. He was slow out of the gate, kind of didn't do much running. It was off a 232-day layoff. Okay. Then he came back at Saratoga. He improved, but he ran kind of a subpar effort, a C plus. And then they put him on turf. Okay. This is not what he wants to do. He couldn't keep up, and he's not a sprinter type. So the suggestion was drop. Let's get him back on the dirt. And they did. They dropped back on dirt, and then he gets this kickback race. So, if we can kind of like ignore that race, and if we can get him back sprinting to, the potential for him is in the 80s or even higher, right? Because there's a 2-year-old around 80. So this horse, I think, is really under the radar here, and could be a horse. Now he switched barns, so don't know how to read that with the new trainer quite yet. But I just think he's sneaky because I think there's some form there that's hidden between the turf race and the kickback race that could help us get a good price. And he's a juicy 12-1 in the morning line. So here's a horse that you might want to consider, especially like I said, in exotics and in backup multi-race tickets. The other things that I noticed is like the 5, 6, and 7 look like they plot very well. What I don't like about the 6 is the layoff. Now Bond's pretty good with layoffs. He can bring horses back, but I wasn't crazy about this horse's finger legs form before there. Before that, the 5 is a horse I want to take a look more closely at. The 7 is okay, can't complain, but he's 7-2. I think he's going to be shorter than that. He's dropping. Just not excited about this horse, and it's a horse that I really don't like to back at a shorter price. That'd be 3-1, 7-2 even, but he may be even shorter than that. Let's look at the 5 because he's another sneaky, and you got to kind of dig a little bit when you look at this horse. Kind of started out on the dirt around a 65, good third, and then even improved in his second start. And then he had trouble to start at Saratoga, and then they switched him to turf and never put him back on dirt. So, whatever. They thought he could be a turf horse. Didn't see that, but they thought so, his connections. And so they kept him on turf for a long time. Then he switches barns. Then they switch him back to dirt, the original one. He had traffic at this level and ran a credible fifth. Not a bad race considering the traffic and everything. So he's ran a pretty decent race at 74. Then they stretch him out and they move him up. And he kind of pops out of the gate, which is a good thing. Runs pretty good for like about a half a mile and then kind of chucks it. But he was pressed too. And that was the first time for Davis, switched barns there. Now he's back to doing what he likes to do, sprinting on the dirt, which he hasn't done much. And if you kind of look at his 2-year-old numbers, the 74, 65, if he could just project a little bit more improvement off the recent 74 he had, where he had traffic, maybe he's in the upper 70s. I'm not saying this horse is a, absolute win candidate, but this is a horse that could factor in the exotics too. So he's going to be a big price, 12-1 in morning line, but his horse is going to be much higher than that, and he just plots well. So another horse you might consider for the exotics, Indoctrinate in race 8 Aqueduct. So again, in review, the 9 just stands out on our plot. There doesn't seem to be a lot of holes in terms of his form. And then the 8 is an interesting long shot Eucharist, with kind of some dirtied up form. And then the 5, maybe an underneath horse. Okay, that's it. Race 8, video race of the day from Optix. Thanks.